everyone. Thank you for joining me on Pilot Talk Podcast, where I interview some of the world's most interesting pilots about the models of aircraft that they fly and love the most. And today I am so pleased to have with me a Czech airman, a training center evaluator for flight safety, who is a guru on the Falcon line of aircraft. And today I'm going to talk with Jim Word about the Falcon 900EX EZ and some of its predecessors. Jim, thanks so much for agreeing to join me today.
My pleasure.
Well, now, Jim, can you tell us how long you've been flying this model? How many different models of Falcons have you flown? I think you've flown all of them, right?
Yeah, I've flown all of them. This particular airplane I started on in 2004 was as a flight safety instructor. I was briefly on it, and then let me think how this evolved. Then I was working for a company that was flying 900C, which is an earlier version of this, and then we transitioned to Gulfstream 450, 550. So I sort of got away from this. I stopped instructing on it at Flight Safety. I instructed on the 900EX Classic, which is an early version of this airplane. But I've been around it a long time. It's a great airplane. The Falcon line is it's a wonderful product. It's manufactured in Mérignac in Bordeaux, in the same factory as supersonic fighters, so it doesn't take a stretch to understand how that technology cohabitates in the Falcon. They're just wonderful machines. And your second question, I think, was when did I start flying Falcons? And I am embarrassed to say 1969 in November, the Falcon 20. Which was the first Falcon, and it was also a wonderful airplane. It was brought to the U.S. by a man that you may know of, Charles Lindbergh. Was sent to the factory in France sent to Europe to look at this airplane. Came back and brought it to Pan American World Airways founder Juan Trippe, and they decided to market it in the U.S., and that's the way it began.
Wow, that's amazing. So you are absolutely the right person for me to talk to about Falcons on this podcast. So I want to talk a little bit, because you've flown some other mid-size jets and some large cabin aircraft. And I think that you can tell us overall how the Falcon line compares to some of its competitors. As a layperson and not a veteran Falcon pilot, my kind of what I hear on the street is that they're easy to operate. The fly-by-wire is exceptional, and they're very fuel efficient for having 3 engines. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the first thing I want to mention is that the Falcon 900 EZ is not a fly-by-wire. The subsequent airplane, the 7X, 8X, is a fly-by-wire airplane, and it's a lovely machine. But we're talking about the 900EX Classic, which is the easy way to say this is the flight controls, aileron, rudder, and such that are connected directly to the surface of the flight control, the aileron, for example, by push rods, which is unusual. It evolves from the Dassault supersonic fighter technology, because they have to be able to be shot at and survive. So cables are not so appropriate there. The controls go through a servo unit, which is basically a power steering unit, which applies hydraulic power controlled by the speed of the airplane. High-speed flight, the controls are made harder to operate. So that's it's a wonderful system. Works very well. Never had a problem with it, as far as I know.
So competitive differentiator one can be shot at and still survive. I'm taking notes here.
We certainly don't want to be shot at, but that was the technology, the origin of the technology, as I understand it.
So getting back to a little bit more serious note, you know that I'm teasing you here. From a performance perspective, what's been your experience with the Falcon 900?
Well, the 900 is, of course, a 3-engine airplane. The Garrett engine, TFE 731 dash, any number of different dash numbers. I think it's 5C or something on the 900. It's a good engine. It's very reliable. It's been around for a long time. It's very efficient. It's not technology that's the latest, but it's established technology, and it's efficient. It's a fan engine. There are 3 of them, so that's very appealing to a lot of people for obvious reasons. The airplane is relative to the other competitor airplanes is smaller, so it's slightly more efficient, I would say. I don't want to, I can't be all that specific, but it's smaller. Obviously, it's going to operate with less kerosene, Jet A1, and it's less. One of the French engineers told me one time. He said, "Jim, I think aluminum weighs the same in France as it does in the U.S." His comment was that if you build an airplane with a higher surface area pointed into the wind that you're flying into, it's going to take more push to get it to go through the air. So more push, more fuel.
Okay. What about the operational limitations of a Falcon?
It's a very, very flexible airplane. Operates into easily a 4,000 foot runway at sea level. The longest flight I have made in it was Helsinki to International Falls, Minnesota, 9 hours and 22 minutes. Landed with, I think, 2,200 pounds of fuel. You have to work at it to extend the range that long. The ones that operate with the added winglet, you know what that is, the winglet. They operate better. They have better climb performance and also extend the range about 200 miles, I'm told.
Okay, you don't have any experience with that, though. They definitely look sexier on the ground.
I've flown the one with winglets, but I haven't pushed that specific one to any extent. The one I was speaking of was an older 900EX Classic. The previous airplane that was I don't think they'd mind me saying, it was international paper flight, and that was the longest one we flew. So it's possible to fly it well in excess of 9 hours anyway, but you've got to work at it.
Well, and you have to like being in a cabin for that long if you're a passenger as well. Let's talk a little bit about passenger comfort in these aircraft.
Sure. Well, I'm not a passenger typically, but I hear good things. It's well appointed, it's roomy, it's wide, it's tall, and there are accommodations for sleeping. There are dining table and so forth. So it's and pull-out table. So I think it's very well appointed. It has a good-sized galley, good enough. But the flight attendants wouldn't agree with that, but it does what it is designed to do.
Great. Well, what do the flight attendants say? They think the galley is not quite big enough for them, but other than that, how do they feel about serving clients in that?
Our lovely colleagues, the flight attendants, the galley was the size of an elephant. It wouldn't be big enough. But they do what they have to do, and they do a great job.
Well, now the other thing that people sometimes complain about in a house, the size of the kitchen and the size of the closet. How about the luggage capacity for a Falcon?
The luggage capacity is wonderful for a number of reasons. First of all, it starts out pretty big. It's accessible from the cabin through the aft lavatory. And the great thing about the Falcon models, and this I can't remember now about we didn't have an external access to the luggage in the Falcon 20 because we didn't have that much luggage capacity. But in the Falcon 50, the Falcon 900, the you have access to the luggage from the cabin and also from the outside. So you load and unload from the outside. And the great thing about the Falcon, as opposed to other major airplanes on the market, is it has a door which closes from the outside, as opposed to doors which slide down from the top, like all Boeing jets and so forth, and other manufacturers. So you have to open the door. Well, I'm not going to get into that, but in the Falcon, you can pack the luggage from the outside, standing on the ground. You don't have to have a ladder or anything to get luggage in the aft luggage area, and then you can close the door electrically from the outside. It can be because of that. It's physics. It's because of that you can load it much more effectively and quicker and easier, as well as unload. So it's a wonderful system, and I've suggested this system to other manufacturers, and they know better than I do. So here we go.
Well, that's very valuable feedback on that.
No,
and I like being able to access luggage from the lavatory. I think that's a great feature, especially on those long legs where you might be changing clothes or refreshing yourself after sleeping. I think that's a great customer-focused feature. So let's talk about the reliability rate of the Falcon 900. Do you know offhand the dispatch reliability rates on this aircraft? And then let's talk a little bit about Falcon Response, which is their response team to make sure that AOGs are the shortest amount of time possible.
Well, those guys are great. I've flown some trips with them. They're very dedicated to the mission. There's always somebody available to respond, and they operate out of Teterboro, which is where all the parts store, or it's not where all the parts are, but there's certainly a great parts warehouse for Dassault and Teterboro. But the airplane, I can't really quote numbers on Reliant dispatch reliability, but it's good. It's great. It's as good as any other airplane. I mean, they're all great. Things break, and that's just the way it is. But this airplane is the way I would describe this airplane as opposed to others. It's not quite as complex because it's an earlier design. It was designed in the 90s, and it's a long-standing design, basically. For the earlier airplane, the 900 A and B were designed in the mid-90s. So the basic design has been around a long time. It's established, it's well understood, and people understand it. It's still, aside from the fact that it has a pretty advanced electronic flight deck, it's still pretty much of an analog airplane, which from my point of view, analog is fine. Nothing wrong with it. It's been working since the Stone Age, and let's not overcomplicate our lives with fixing things that don't need fixing.
Well, I think something that you mentioned is a significant thing to look at, because there are a lot of manufacturers who have designed an aircraft and then retired it and brought something new out. And you mentioned this, the only other aircraft that I can think of, the line that I can think of that has had the same longevity as the Falcon 900 series is probably the Challenger series by Bombardier, and that's a smaller cabin than what we see in the Falcon 900. Let's talk a little bit about
the Challenger RENE has at least the largest, probably slightly larger than the 900, I believe. I can't quote the exact dimensions, but certainly not small.
Okay, and the Global's a little bit bigger.
Global is quite a bit bigger, yes.
Yeah. So in the Falcon series, let's talk about that longevity. What improvements have you seen in the aircraft from the mid-90s to the late teens? That's a long stretch for an aircraft.
It is, yeah, it is. But the basic fundamental design is not so changed, because it was a wonderful design to begin with. Dassault does not take design lightly. Dassault, I'll give Dassault a nod here. Dassault and the Falcon 50 in the late 70s, early 80s designed the first airplane with an area rule Coke bottle type rear fuselage and supercritical wing. The first ones that did that on the planet. Dassault software was used to design the Boeing 777 Dassault understands how to use computer-aided design and manufacture very well, and they sell it to other manufacturers. So the airplane was always an advanced design. The Falcon 20 in the 60s was a very advanced airplane. The engines were a little puny, but the airplane was a lovely design, very advanced, and as a result, it doesn't require a lot of refinement. There's certainly been refinements and advancements, but basically it's the same system with minor refinements that it was in the 90s, because great design to begin with.
Oh, great. Jim, have you heard about, as you are training other Falcon 900 pilots and in their recurrence, so they've obviously been flying a lot, have you heard about any chronic maintenance issues that maybe a buyer needs to look out for if they're purchasing a pre-owned Falcon 900?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things. The first thing I would look for is find a brilliant maintenance person who's familiar with the model and the design, and have that person make that judgment. I work up front. I don't know a lot about maintenance, and I don't need to. If it's working, it works. If it doesn't, it's broken. And somebody else takes care of that. All airplanes, the Falcon is not a corrosion intensive airplane. It doesn't have a lot of corrosion issues, but you certainly should find out if there are any, and that's a big deal, as you know. But I would get an expert.
Good advice. Talk to me about fuel burn. What's been your experience there? Is there a significant increase in fuel burn at takeoff? Is it pretty much what the manufacturer says it's going to be?
It's pretty much what the manufacturer says. I think they're very good about, they don't overstate the capability of the airplane in terms of fuel burn. I would look at the manufacturer's documents. They're very reliable, very active, and also, of course, as you know, the BCA, Business Commercial Aviation stuff is accurate. NBAA, I'm sure, has some reference materials, I would say Miami to New York is going to be less than 8,000 pound burn, so that's pretty solid.
Yeah, is that a pretty typical city pair that's flown on this aircraft? Which one do you see the most?
This time of year it is. It's very busy on weekends, on Friday afternoons. Westchester to Miami or thereabouts is going to be pretty busy.
They're all following the president.
I don't know about that, but they're following their nose to a place that's warm, particularly lately.
Right, crazy weather.